Hello and welcome to the first ever, whoa, I haven't been able to say that in a while, episode of You've Heard of Hot or Not. Now welcome to Comm's Review. How are we doing, buddy?
I'm very well, buddy. How are you?
Very good. So, very brief run through here. The format of this is very similar to the Hot or Not idea. We're going to talk about three things we think are going well, three things I think are maybe falling off a cliff, but we want to talk about some of the wider corporate sector, how things are going well there, and a little bit maybe not quite markets, etc., but how that might be impacting, so things like earnings calls, etc. So strap in. Let's start with the big win of the week for me on a couple of levels as well, actually, and that was the Meta earnings call.
Okay.
So straight in with earnings calls, because as you know, this is my thing of the year. I just thought that this was great on a couple of levels. First of all, let's just talk about recording quality. So the big thing I've been whining about is that so many of these calls actually come through really badly.
Yeah.
Absolutely everybody in the call was crystal clear, really easy to hear. But the other part that lived in tandem with that was Mark just coming on sounding calm, authoritative. This new Mark Zuckerberg, wherever he's come from, was impressive.
The rebranded Zuck.
Rebranded Zuck. He dived into the word a little often. That got slightly frustrating. And slightly unpredictably, they used the word AI 90 times, which made it the 16th most used word in the whole thing. And that includes it in, right? It still made it to number 16. Yeah. But overall, I just thought a couple of things. Firstly, the shares rocketed on the back of it. They've got an interesting plan, but he's communicating that plan. I've been quite critical in the past when we look at the marketing they did. And not only did they do that, but they were leading an industry with VR, and a lot of the stuff that we do in the innovation team wasn't really being communicated very well, I think, by Meta, who was supposed to be pioneering it. This company feels like it's got a vision, it's got a way to action it, and there'll be bumps on the way. And yeah, look, he started open source, so less of an issue for them anyway. Llama's approach was very similar to that, and I think it's quite exciting, but I just think they did a really good job of presenting it. While Elon was self-promoting on Twitter about how many people had watched a Tesla earnings calls on X, despite the fact that obviously half of them had watched it just because they were following Elon. And I had a look at that. It was really flat. Meta's was good, well presented, clear. I thought that was...
So hang on. So no, you're not talking about the format here. You're just talking about the way it was communicated.
No, I think the format is a shame still. It's a web... It's not even a webcast. It's these phone in, Q4 thing. There's opportunity to lift that so much further, but within that world, it was much better than you've seen in the past.
So
he was
sort of
clearer.
Tied into this Zuck rebrand, basically. Okay, understood.
They just led it well. The whole team were just on point for it and kind of calm and authoritative and understood where they were going. There was just felt like a cohesive company, at least at the very top piece.
Well, I've got things to say about this, but I think I might actually form the wider discussion. That's a discussion on the topic.
Okay. The second thing, this ties into what we talked about at our predictions for the year, but I still think this is the year of potentially us seeing AI move from theory to practice. Okay. And so my pick here is Run AI, and they were acquired by NVIDIA in December. And I just think to me, let's take from Run AI out to enterprise AI becoming implementable. Really interesting to see a narrative starting to form here. They're beginning to be able to turn the idea of what I could do these 3,000 things into this for you at enterprise level, which is hugely complicated because of all the different data sets that you need to be able to take into account. We've actually distilled that.
Sorry, I think you might need to give us a sort of a foundation level. What would be the difference between consumer and enterprise AI from a foundations here?
A couple of things. The first, of course, is the much stricter feeling of need of privacy and security around the data. So as individuals, we are remarkably willing to give away quite a lot of our personal data and not be too worried about it. At a corporate level, you have to be a lot stricter about that. Yeah. And then the second thing is the complexity. As an individual, we may have an iCloud and a thing over here and and a Gmail and have to join a couple of bits together. But a corporate can have all sorts of different software systems with data in different formats. You need to try and normalize, standardize that to make it work. But obviously, coming at all of this from a marketing perspective, the lens I'm applying here is they're doing like the True Group animated explainer video on themselves. They're taking this and they are getting better at distilling it. Run AI's success has then got them to a point of being acquired. But even IBM's earnings calls, I think I got the note here. Yeah, IBM saw a 12% hike this week as a result of the fact that they're now getting enterprise AI into people and operating. And of course, that's partly practical. The AI is there. But I think in part it is that the messaging is getting better from these guys. So they're getting a handle on how to communicate the benefits and distill down some of the complexity, because it is, as I said, if you're taking on a big corporate and you've got all these different potential data tranches. It's a big undertaking. It's getting simpler. It's getting easier.
And Run AI, I assume, was just a service provider for enterprise.
Just a really good example. Just a really good example of somebody. Yeah, they took it on. They particularly worked on that, providing developer tools to normalize and then analyze the data. Fine. And then, if you have seen Hot or Not already, you will know that we're having a bit of a LinkedIn fanboy week this week.
Well, I am. You seem to always have a problem with them.
Well, yes, it's true. I never go on the platform, do I? But I did appreciate, and I think there's a little bit of irony here. I'm going to be a bit scandalous. LinkedIn's forklift advert.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want you to picture, for those behind the camera, that we're sat like this at a table and a giant forklift drives through that wall, picks up this table, takes it away. And they said, don't try and advertise forklifts to people in finance. Find your audience. And I think that's actually really clever, because the one thing we do come back to LinkedIn for, and I'm sure so many people do, is the demographic knowledge that they hold about what industry you're in, what your job title is, how big a company it is. So it's one of the best places for salespeople to be finding out about their audience. They were leveraging that to say, therefore, it's a really great place for marketing and adverts. In our experience, it can be a really expensive place to advertise and get very little. And that's not just on our own behalf. But let's put that to one side. I thought the advert was clever. It was nice. LinkedIn is the corporate social media, but they weren't being too stiff. It was balancing. Here's an office, but let's have some fun. I liked it.
I think it's a generational thing that's allowing B2B to C, as we understand it, to happen. B2B to C, that is something that will just become more and more prevalent, in the fact that you can take corporate messages and, having an ad with that sort of comic scenario is a old school consumer construct, right? Not something you would usually see in B. So seeing more of that used, and it's been happening for a while, it's only going to happen more.
We talked about it on the poll.
Yeah. I think, that's something I can appreciate.
And then I'm just going to, because it's the first episode, immediately break the 3 and 3 rule and wedge a 4th in.
Okay.
There's not even necessarily a corporate.
I was not told about this.
Although technically does involve a listed company, and that is that my hero Lewis Hamilton joined Ferrari this week and put the best first day photo ever out there. And I suppose I've enjoyed this on a few levels. I thought the picture was great. I thought he looked like a Don. But the commentary about it has been amazing. Incredible world-class photographers talking about how great the composition is, the stylists loving this, the car lovers loving the F4, the whole thing. And I just thought that was great. It was lovely to see. For a little moment, he was bigger than Ferrari for me about that release. And that,
he's always been bigger than Ferrari.
Well, I think it's going to be, and on a spicy level, it's going to be quite interesting to see how he gets on with Ferrari. Think they're big. The clash could come.
Okay, well, look, you slipped in the 4th. Let's go to your knot.
Okay. So the knot is directly linked to our first hot, because I thought, well, I want to keep going on this earnings call theme and see if we could give you an example of how it falls the other way. Okay. And it also led me to do a bit of reading on this and wonder whether sometimes it's a bit tactical. So I think you might like this. So my knot was the Samsung earnings call. It was inherently nothing wrong with it, but just all of the things that were done really well, that clarity of mission and vision and easy to understand and clear lines and everything just weren't there. So there's no specific criticism about Samsung performance. It was just that this was almost the more traditional experience. There were loads of them that are really quite difficult. Happened to be the one I listened to first, so we picked it. But I kept going on this. And there's quite an interesting study on earnings call audio quality and the impact it has. So I'm going to try and cite everybody. So forgive me, I'm read this out so I'm being fair. Research by Seoul National University's Bok Baik, Chicago student Alex Kim, MIT PhD student David Kim, and Korea University Sangwan Yoon, so that we've cited all of them. Basically did a really interesting piece. They took all of the audio, fed it into a machine that would work out how accurately they were talking and when they were fudging some of the words or being a bit there. Okay. And then had studied the impact of that on the share price. And what came through was, if you had a really clear, great earnings call, like I've just mentioned, I felt Meta had, but either in a positive or a negative. So it was presented clearly and it was a positive session. You saw the share price would go up, but it was presented clearly and they had to admit there were some issues. The share price went down, right? By a reasonably wide barrier. Yeah. If they did a slightly fumbly, mudgery one, in either direction, it went less. So now the theory was that if you've got some bad news, you just sort of go, yeah, something like this. And if you've got good news, you should be really bold and big and clear on it. I just thought it was a nice bit of insight for you. So Samsung hit the not pile for not delivering, or maybe for being, maybe they are the secret stealth hot of the week.
Okay,
and they fudged through some slightly dodgy numbers.
I was going to leap on that, saying that, and this is probably what we talk at the beginning, we talk about this so much, is that retail investing is becoming bigger and bigger. It's becoming more global. I think financial literacy is getting better and better.
Well, I hope so.
And I just think these earnings calls could have so much more impact if they were presented in a proper way. And now I was going to jump on that. I was going to say, look, ultimately earnings calls, I think for a while will be done the same way, but being able to translate, recommunicate, wrap that stuff into other messaging, like you were talking about earlier, Elon Musk on Twitter, even as a channel, being able to get out in a different way is going to be incredibly important.
But, you're so right. It's his storytelling. It's literally peak storytelling. Yes, an earnings call has to deliver the facts. Yes, it's a compliance obligation, but it is absolutely a storytelling moment. And it's so underplayed for that, isn't it? And I actually think part of the reason that Tesla is where it is the Elon storytelling goes on all the time.
Yeah,
so the retail investors can buy into something.
Of course,
it's a real message in
That's
there.
That's a story
isn't it?
He's been building up for over a decade.
So he's going straight in the not pile because in at number 2 is full self-driving from Tesla. Now, this is for a couple of reasons. Actually, to be fair to him, Elon took it on the chin this week by admitting that some of the cars they said had the hardware to do full self-driving were actually going to need more hardware. So it used to be, hey, we're going to give you a software update, the car will drive itself.
Yeah.
That sounded super exciting. It's then gone, actually, we're going to have to change a bit of the hardware in the car.
Okay.
But that wasn't really why I put it in the not pub. It's not directly at Tesla and Elon. The question that came to me were twofold. How does this make it to Europe in our much heavier regulated framework? We feel miles away. The fact that in Texas now they're about to have cars that literally drive themselves around the road, it's happening, right? Feels so far away from where we've got to. Whereas in the EU, we've just mandated that every car bings at you if you go over 30 miles an hour and a limit thinks is 30 kind of stuff. And then on a purely selfish level, of course, what's going to happen to people like me who want to drive their cars? But I genuinely do wonder how, because this is a messaging, this is a narrative piece that they need to build as a company. If they're going to make this global, they're going to need to tell the story of how successful this has been in America, not just on everyone's using it, but it's safe and it's enforceable and it can be, the narrative that plays to other economies. And I think it's going to be really interesting, but as a sort of one of the hiccups on the road, only this week, I think in general they're doing great things, but this week they hit the knot because they've had to admit one wasn't quite as ready. And what it implies is that some of that hardware didn't keep pace with the change in technology. And so the question you immediately ask is, well, will that keep happening?
Well, when you say hardware, what's specifically hardware?
So all the cameras and sensors that they build into the cars, right? And it's like, well, actually they don't, maybe, and forgive me, I didn't read all the way into the detail of what piece of hardware, but whether it's the fidelity on the camera or the radar's a bit different. It makes you wonder, will all the cars become redundant as the software evolves? And anyway, there you go.
Well, I mean, I don't know much about self-driving cars, but I certainly know that if Texas is going to be the guinea pig state, then that will spread. Once it's successful, once that story's been written, then it will spread over here.
And as we just talked about, he's the king storyteller, this guy.
It will happen. So once they start rolling it out, once they iron out the kinks, once there's enough of a demand, it will happen with regulations in Europe, I would imagine.
So we've saved the big one till last.
Yeah,
this is a very thorny issue in this particular office. We're talking about the office environment.
Okay.
Because my last nut of the week is nuts. The man who has his hyper nut list, I'm going to put it to you that having snacking nuts in an office is incredibly cruel on everybody else in the office who then realizes they're eating nuts and that they're absolutely loaded with calories.
So actually what you're saying is that they're not because they are so delicious.
I started with nuts to wind you up, but no, the wider piece is because this reminded me years ago when we had our first office in WeWork. And they used to put all those endless biscuit tins that never ran out.
And because I had willpower.
No, but I mean, we had staff who were like complaining that they wouldn't stop giving them fucking
just
biscuits.
Called willpower. I lost weight during WeWork. It's called willpower.
So it's a real tease just because we're now, I'm loving the fact that we're now back together full time every day at the office, but it has made me laugh that now the snacks are like, oh, hang on, we've got to be careful what we have around here or I'm going to be twice the size by Christmas.
I am nothing without nuts. I can't live without
nuts.
You
are nuts about nuts.
I cluck for nuts when they're not around. Therefore, I need nuts just to feel.
Let's give some context here, though. We're not talking like, there's a little figure. We're talking 6 or 8 bags of varied nuts and flavors.
That's an exaggeration.
I think you said that to me.
Oh, at home? Yes. At home, yeah. Okay. But in the office, there's only ever 2 bags. And, anyway, a spicy
just poking fun.
Just a spicy one for our first episode. So, look, hope you've enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Thank you, buddy. Some very good ones there. Look forward to episode 2 next week.
See you then.
Lots of love, everyone.